Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I wish you a wonderful day again from Prague, but we have a guest who is now in Bloomington in Indiana in the United States. And I'm very, very pleased that I can invite today's guest, Moya Wright, who will tell all her stories. And it's very rich, really rich life. So I will be very happy if you can share your comments with us. You can share your questions. And it's really, really big pleasure to welcome Moya Wright for another interview during this first Worldwide Online Harp Congress, which I have created. And it's my big pleasure to have our guest. Moya, hello.
Hello, Jana, and everybody listening. And thank you so much for inviting me on the Harp channel. I think it's a wonderful thing that you have introduced here, especially in this time where no live concerts and we're feeling cut off from each other. So thank you for doing all of this.
Thank you. Moya, tell us, you are now in Bloomington, but your way to get to the United States was quite long. It was really going through many, many ways. So you are originally from Zimbabwe, which is actually a very interesting country for everybody, even to imagine that there can be a harpist. So how did it come that you started to play the harp?
Well, it was a very unusual beginning. When I was born in Bulawayo, at that time it was a British colony and it was called Southern Rhodesia. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it went through many political changes. Being a British colony, it had a lot of people from the UK and some from Europe, and very much a new country. It was only really opened up for settlement by the colonialists in about 1890. Mm-hmm. And they brought with them a love of culture. And since, of course, there was not a whole lot of Western culture in the middle of Africa, they created their own. So we had very active music life. There was an amateur orchestra. My parents both played in it. They were both violinists. Mm-hmm. And it was full symphony size. It was 80 people and consisted of amateurs and music teachers. And I started learning piano when I was 6. And my parents used to come back from practice and they'd say, oh, pianist is playing the harp part. We really wish we had a harpist. And I was intrigued. I'd never really heard a harp. And suddenly my school friend said, oh, she'd heard there was a harp in the Academy of Music and she was going along to see it. And did I want to come with her? And so I did. And I was fascinated. And it turned out that she decided not to study harp, but I said to my parents, I really want to. And I didn't think much more about it because there were no harpists or harp teachers. And within a week, I found myself back in the academy. And the director of the academy was an amazing person, Robert Simpson. Mm-hmm. He was actually an engineer by trade. He was retired. And he was the director of the music academy and just loved music in all its forms and so enthusiastic on bringing music to the young people. And his motto was, if somebody wanted to learn an instrument, if there was no teacher, he would find a way to teach it. So my first lesson, I went in and there's this little harp and he took me to his desk and he said, well, here's the article from the Encyclopedia Britannica and here's a diagram of the pedals. And here's some music by Mildred Dilling, the first harp book, and go and play something. I'm like, oh, okay. So that continued. I had weekly lessons for a long time with him. I mean, nobody told me that this was a difficult way to start learning the harp. I just had never heard it. Of course, having a piano background was very helpful.
Absolutely.
And after 2 years, I was 14 at that time, and he said to my parents, look, I really don't know what else to teach her. She needs to go to a professional teacher. Mm-hmm. So next thing, I found myself going in the school holidays down to Cape Town to a teacher there. And I had lessons every other week for 2 weeks, every other day for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Now, just as a background, to get down to Cape Town, it's actually 2,000 miles from where we lived. And so I went down on a steam engine train. It took 48 hours. You go through the Kalahari Desert. There are all sorts of little stops. Of course, it was coal. You know, they had to stop and refuel with coal. And there was soot everywhere, in your hair, in the air, everywhere. But that's how you traveled in those days. And it was great fun.
Mhm.
So anyway, so I had those 2 weeks of intense lessons and went back. And I really was not thinking of doing music as a career. But by the time I got to my senior year in high school, I suddenly decided, yes, I really wanted to do that. So I enrolled in the University of Cape Town, which is where the teacher taught who I'd seen in the school holidays. And I did an artist diploma there. The teacher's name was Betty Woolley. Her maiden name was Betty Evans, and she was Welsh. Absolutely amazing teacher and amazing person. I mean, I learned so much from her. And she had been a student of Gwendolyn Mason at the Royal College and had come out to Cape Town and joined the orchestra. And then when she got married, she continued teaching. And she really is an unsung hero in the harp world. I mean, she's a phenomenal teacher, absolutely phenomenal.
That's great.
So after that, I was about to graduate from the university, and they were advertising for the harp position in the South African Broadcast Orchestra.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, I'll go and play for them. I really didn't think anything. And next thing, I found myself in the orchestra at age 21. And after that, I moved to another orchestra in South Africa, the Orchestra of the Performing Arts Council of the Transvaal, which was specifically opera and ballet. We also did musicals. Very, very busy schedule, long days, long nights. And then I decided, all right, I want to continue my studies. And I thought, well, am I going to go to England? And then at that time, an American harpist came out to work in the orchestra that I had left. And she was a student of Alice Shalafou in the USA. And I decided, oh, this is what I want to do. So I went over to the USA and I started studying with Alice. And I spent 2 years with her, a phenomenal technician, and quite a character. And I mean, as anybody knows Alice Shalafou, they know all the stories and her character and her dynamics. Of course, she was about 4'11", this tiny little bundle of energy. She was amazing. And then after I studied with her, I went to Temple University in Philadelphia and did my master's degree with Edna Phillips. She had, of course, was the first woman harpist in the Philadelphia Orchestra and continued to teach after she retired. I was probably her last student. She was already in her 70s. And she was an amazing counterpart to Alice Shalafou. They had both studied with Salcedo, but totally different approaches. Alice was build a technique note by note, and Edna was build the music phrase and then figure out note by note, and totally different. And between the two of them, it was a great introduction. And Edna was very influential in the music circles. She introduced me to all the right people. So I played first in the Marlboro Festival, which is an amazing festival run by Rudolf Serkin in those days. And the next year I played in Tanglewood in the orchestra. And in between that, she had me, introduced to people, playing for people. And one of the people she introduced me to was a person who was then the conductor of the Hong Kong Philharmonic. So I was actually in Tanglewood in the summer festival, and the phone went, and it was the conductor, and he said, would you like to be principal harp in Hong Kong? So I'm like, surprise. Okay. So I mean, it actually turned, it was amazing. I mean, I wasn't really even thinking of it. I had played to him because he also ran the Grand Tetons Music Festival in the summer. And I was hoping I could play in that festival, but I was not thinking of a full-time job in the Hong Kong Philharmonic. So anyway, so within a couple of weeks, I was on the plane to Hong Kong. And I arrived there 1980, and I played there for 8 years until 1988. And it was an amazing time. The orchestra, when I first came, was relatively small, a little unknown. By the time I left, the standard was just very, very high. Amazing guest conductors, resident conductors, and also being the only professional harpist literally on the whole island, I had my pick of everything I could do. I taught a lot. I taught in the universities, the music school, I made CDs, I did recordings, I played concertos, I did as much chamber music as I wanted. And it really was a phenomenally busy time.
That's amazing.
Gosh.
That's
so
interrupting.
Sorry.
That's really fantastic. Absolutely.
Well, it certainly was an unusual way to get into your orchestral career. And just interrupting then a bit, I did go to I think it was the second World Harp Congress, which was in Israel in 1985, I believe. And it was right after one of the Israel International Harp Competitions. It followed right on from there, and it was in a kibbutz outside Jerusalem. And it was wonderful. It was actually a small number of people at that time. But of course, being a small group, you got to know everybody, conversations over lunch, over dinner, listening to everybody, doing social events together. It was really a wonderful time. And Joseph Molnar was there. Also, I had met him. He had come to Hong Kong for a couple of times to play a recital. And he was at the World Harp Congress in Israel as well. And the next Congress was in Vienna in '87. And so I contacted him and I said, I've just, with the flutist, released a CD and I'd really love to do some concerts. So I got to do that. I came over and I played one piece on the new music concert. And then we also played in a chamber music concert. And that was with Lee Humphreys, who is the principal flutist of the Hong Kong Philharmonic. So I believe that you have the recording of me and Lee playing on the new music concert. And the piece is called Dance in the Forest by a Chinese composer, Du Mingxing. So the story behind this was also pretty interesting. So I was playing in the orchestra and teaching and doing concerts. And a person in Hong Kong, who many people know his name now as Klaus Heyman, he started a Hong Kong record company. And he started recording not only the Hong Kong Philharmonic, but also musicians in the area, and not only in Hong Kong, but in China. And it would be sometimes Western music, sometimes traditional Chinese music. So he came up to me and he said, I'd like you to do a flute and harp recording. And I want it to be of Chinese folk songs, but arranged for flute and harp. And I've got it all arranged. All you have to do is play it. So he had arranged for one of the eminent composers in China, Du Mingxing, to arrange a series of traditional folk tunes for flute and harp. So Dance in the Forest is one of them. And we did record the whole CD called Chinese Music for Flute and Harp. Did very well. And then Hong Kong Records was actually taken over. He launched Naxos Records, as everybody knows the name Naxos, which is international. And over the years, my recording went out of print, and I kept thinking I really must try and do something to get it back in print. And then, to my surprise, Naxos redistributed it along with many of their earlier recordings that they made in Hong Kong and Asia. So it's now back on the Naxos label. And I think people's reaction when I played this was interesting, because the program is new music. So of course, most of the pieces that came before and after what I played were very contemporary. And then suddenly we come out with this very tonal, very beautiful folk music. And people were just like, oh, that's just so refreshing. So I think people really enjoyed it. And we also played chamber music concert later in the Congress as well.
This, unfortunately, I don't have recording, but I have the recording which I sent you and which we will hear after our interview later on. It's not now, because we have every hour, the whole hour in advance now in front of us with you, and you introduce all your fantastic really paths which you went through. It's unbelievable, almost a dream for many young harpists also to happen this to them. So it's really fantastic. And when you stayed in Hong Kong for 8 years, during the time you were performing at Vienna, and you left the Hong Kong because of what reason?
At that time, Hong Kong, of course, was still a British colony, and it was going to be returned to China. And the future was uncertain. The orchestra was giving contracts only for 2 years at a time.
Right.
And we did not know whether our contracts would continue. And a position came open in the orchestra that I had played at in South Africa, which was then renamed as the National Symphony of South Africa. So I went back to South Africa. I was also missing the wide open spaces of Africa a lot. I mean, Hong Kong is very busy and very, very crowded. And it was exhilarating and exciting living there, but it was also exhausting. It's stressful. So I went back to South Africa and I played in the National Symphony until 1992. And I made another recording there. Thomas Reiner, who's a Hungarian and South African composer living in Cape Town, wrote a beautiful concerto for me, which actually I was going to perform at the next World Harp Congress in Amsterdam. So I recorded it, I premiered it in South Africa, and then, as I said, I was going to play it in Amsterdam. Unfortunately, in 1992, I literally overnight, I suffered a ruptured brain aneurysm, and my right side was paralyzed. And so my performing career actually ended overnight. And of course, that was a huge shock. I had known something was not right, but there were none of the classic symptoms. Usually it's very severe headaches. No, I didn't have that, but I could tell something was wrong. And actually, that week I was performing in the orchestra. We were doing Lucia de Lammermoor, which of course has the very big harp cadenza. And I performed that on Friday night, went home, Saturday morning, and the strange thing is that evening I decided to move my telephone, which was in the lounge, and I put it into my bedroom so I could make some calls next morning. And next morning I was lying in bed, I called a couple of people, and I thought, well, I better get up and have breakfast. And as I stood up, my brain ruptured and hemorrhaged. The only thing that really saved me was that I had moved my telephone into my bedroom, and I could still use my left hand, and I was able to call for help. And I called the doctor. They sent the ambulance, and then of course it was months in hospital, was brain surgery. I spent 4 months in a rehabilitation hospital. And in the beginning, I was not able to walk. My right side, my leg as well as my right arm were paralyzed. So I started walking after about 2 months of therapy, and I was able to go home after 4 months. But then, of course, it was a very harrowing time. The question was, what do I do? I mean, I've dedicated pretty much my whole life to music. And I had to do a lot of thinking. It was interesting. I was teaching at the university also, and of course they have career guidance people there. So I went to him and I told him everything, and I said, now I have to think of what direction I can go in. And he listened, he said, what skills do you have? And I told him everything, and he sat there and he said, you are a musician and you will always be a musician, whether you're performing or not, you have to stay in music. And I thought that was just such a wonderful thing to say. And that is very true, because, today, a lot of young people who are studying at university and doing their best, and they get to very high level, not everybody can make their living performing music. And sometimes you do have to change direction and see which way it will go. But what I did learn is that the discipline that you have through learning music and performing and arranging your own career and your own concerts, that kind of self-discipline really will translate into any position that you're in. And I know people who were formerly musicians who are now in the top of their fields in many, many fields, and it's because of the training they had in music and the way you think, the way you prepare, the way you look at details, the way you put all of it together. And very wonderful training for any other position that you end up in.
Yeah, I've not even been aware of all you went through. It's really amazing because I knew that you were an excellent harpist, and it was always a question why you started to be more involved in the publisher of Line and Healy, of the foundation of Salve, and also as a director of the USA International Harp Competition. As you are a very young lady, so why you stopped the harp? So I've not been aware of these or circumstances and the health which appeared in your life. So I really admire you so much, and it's wonderful that you stay with us, because that's really something what makes you also feeling that you are still with the harp connected, and that you did not leave this life of our instrument. That's really, I'm so really honored that you shared all these things with us. So really, you are a wonderful, strong lady. Unbelievable. Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
No, it's not. No, really, it's absolutely true, and I'm really absolutely admire you. I admire you so much for all what you had to go through, because this is, of course, it can happen to anybody of us, and the imagination that we really dedicate our life to the harp and to our instrument, and then suddenly something happens. It can be an accident. It can be whatever, what can totally change your life, and you have to be exactly prepared that it might happen. And what you said, it's so true, and it's so really wise to say to everybody that our life trained by this discipline, it's so helpful for anything else. If not, hopefully not many people happens, but then it can be really helpful to change the position as you did. Really big admiration.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
really,
it was a difficult time, but I got through it, and I think I'd mentioned I was going to perform a concerto in the World Harp Congress in Amsterdam,
right.
and of course I was not able to. In fact, Mario Falcao took it over and he performed it. But I did go to the Congress in Amsterdam and met up again with a lot of my friends in the harp world, and including Victor Salvi, who I always have had the greatest respect for. And of course, I would let it known that I'm obviously not able to perform anymore, but I'm looking for something to stay in the music world. And so he offered me a position in Line and Healy in Chicago. So then I moved there, and as you said, I was in the music department, handled music publishing. I also wrote, for some time I not only wrote, but edited the magazine, The Harp Today. And then in time, they started the Victor Salvi Foundation, and I worked with that, and also helped edit the book on the collection of his amazing historic harps. And those were exhibited also at a World Harp Congress in Geneva. So I got to see Geneva a bit too. And then I moved down to Bloomington to become the executive director of the USA International Harp Competition. I needed a change. I needed a little slower pace of life. I love Bloomington. There's so much beautiful nature around. Chicago is like any big city. It's big and it's busy and it's noisy. But Bloomington is just the sanctuary of peace, beautiful woods and lakes. And of course, with the USA Harp Competition, it really is not a full-time job. I mean, it happens every 3 years. So in order to get a full-time job, I started part-time at working in Indiana University at what was the IU cyclotron, which is a very large nuclear physics accelerator. And eventually they offered me full-time. I was working in events coordination and travel and, handling seminars and conferences and things like that. And so I moved into that full-time. And it's gone through several changes. It's now called the Indiana University Center for Exploration of Energy and Matter. But it still is absolutely cutting-edge accelerator physics, and it's kind of mind-boggling. I mean, I did science in high school, but not at that level. So I've learned to fake it. I mean, I can come up with all these scientific terms, and I can say them very fluently, and all the acronyms and all the abbreviations, and I know all the big names in the science world. by name, not by person. But I really don't understand a lot of what they're doing. But it's fascinating. And there again, as I said, if you're adaptable, you've got the training of focus and discipline from music, that can translate into everything. I mean, I've edited a conference proceedings book on the 10th conference on quasi-elastic neutron scattering. Well, that's not exactly in my my realm of understanding, but I can edit it. So that's what I've been doing.
That's unbelievable. Really, women of every year, you can do anything. You know, it's really unbelievable what you can do. That's fantastic. And because you came to USA only after you were in the South Africa before. So, and then when you went to work in Chicago, it was the first step to the United States, right?
Yes, well, of course I had studied here, but then, I mean, working here was different. And of course, I went through the whole visa situation and then the green card, and now I am a US citizen.
I see.
So, okay. And you know, staying in Bloomington, and I am still, of course, involved in the music world. The World Harp Congress, to my delight, almost went full circle. Mm-hmm. My former student in Hong Kong, Angela Yao, actually was the chief organizer of the World Harp Congress in Hong Kong. Dan Yu was the artistic director, and Angela Yao, my student, was the logistics organizer. So it was wonderful to see it back. I did go back to Hong Kong, and I saw everybody there. And I helped with the advising of that, and I'm honorary advisor of the Hong Kong Harp Chamber, and also the Hong Kong International Harp Competition. I have been coaching some orchestra repertoire classes informally at IU. I do that occasionally, and some of the youth orchestras in the area, I also coach them because, of course, orchestral playing was my love, and I know the repertoire a lot. And for instance, next week I'm judging. There's a high school festival, the National Federation of Music Clubs, and they have several harpists entering. I'm judging that competition too.
Wow. Have you not considered maybe to write a book of the harp parts, orchestra parts, as you are such an expert in the orchestra player? Have you not considered, because if you are also involved in the publishing and so on, maybe you should write the orchestra excerpts book?
Well, I was thinking of that, but of course now Sarah Bullen has put out 2 very good volumes of excerpts. What I do find is what I prefer is to give a harpist the entire part, not just an excerpt, which has some difficult fingering. I think it's important that right from the beginning you don't just study an excerpt, you study the entire part so you know how it fits into every part of the symphony or whatever it is that you're playing. And I think I had a very, because of my background being so different and having to do a lot of studying on my own, I'm able to combine being very analytical as to how you learn something, but how you are trying to get to the finished result. Because that's what I've had from a combination of my teachers. I've had the very technical, building note by note, and I've had the inspired coming from the overall picture and then having to fill in the details. So I try to do that when I'm teaching. I want them to see the whole orchestra part as part of the whole symphony, not just the difficult part where the fingering is tricky. I want them to know the whole thing.
Very good. Wonderful. So do you do also master classes, especially only for the orchestra parts, or only just lessons sometimes like in the coaching?
I have done master classes just for orchestra parts. So it's been a combination. For some years here at IU, we started doing smaller group orchestra repertoire classes, because in a master class you don't have a whole lot of time to say everything. Whereas, and so we broke into smaller classes of an hour each, maybe 3 people, and everybody had to play, and you had, set number of excerpts to work on. And that's actually more productive, because by the time you get to a master class, if the articulation is not there or the phrasing is not there, it's already ingrained in your fingers because they've been working on it and studying it. It's better to explain it in the beginning, and then they've got the correct fingering, they know what phrasing they're aiming at, they can hear the difference between articulation with different fingering, and then keep working on that consistently. But often, I mean, I think when you get to a master class and you're trying to put the icing on the top, sometimes it's a little too late. It's already in the fingering, and it's hard to change at that point.
It's true. But if someone would be interested to have lessons with you for the orchestra part, is it possible to get in contact with you, or is it really exceptional that you give these lessons?
Yes, I can do that. I've also possibly working with Angela in Hong Kong. She has started a World Harp Academy online. And right now it's more the masterclass type things. And we've talked about my doing orchestra coaching that way. And I can certainly do it through her as well.
That's wonderful. So please, everybody who is interested, find the connection. We can maybe write afterwards on the comments also the contact of yours, or on any of the links which you would recommend to contact. So please, we will of course inform you. And Moya, because everything is now during the first Worldwide Online Harp Congress, which is like remembering the memory of the third World Harp Congress in Vienna. We mentioned already that you performed there with the flute. I have the recording of one piece which you have already mentioned. I cannot pronounce the name of the composer. You already said it. So maybe for those who came a little bit later, you can say again. And I would like to know if you have any memories, if you stayed in Vienna for the whole time, if you remember anything from that Congress.
Yes, I did stay in Vienna the whole time, and many, many wonderful concerts. I do remember Vera Dulova, of course, very famous. I was so impressed with the Six Tours de Paris, 6 harps. And just, I think the thing that I remember mainly about Vienna was the exquisite concert halls. I had not spent much time in Europe, and to be suddenly surrounded by this incredible beauty of playing in some of the palaces and the huge rooms with, you know, towering ceilings was just, oh, it's wonderful. That's the best place to play harp, is in a large room with a tall ceiling. And I was listening to some of the other comments, and somebody else mentioned this, and I will mention it also. It was an unbelievably hot summer in Vienna, and everybody was struggling with the heat and the tuning of the harps and the strings popping. And I do remember that. That's always a harpist nightmare, is strings popping and humidity, and you know, we have to deal with that. And of course I had to learn to do a lot of that in Hong Kong. It's very, very humid all the time in Hong Kong. And then when they turn the air conditioning on, the temperature will drop immediately to actually quite cold. So if you're bringing the harp in from outside into inside, you usually have a couple of strings going. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that in Vienna it was I know that also my performance was so out of tune, because it went through the performing so out of tune during this, that it was new strings broken before. I know, I remember it was really, and everybody was only with the program doing this waving so that they could survive, because there was no air conditioning during these concerts. So I remember very well. That's very So, and tell me, which congresses, except this one in Copenhagen, which one did you also attend it afterwards? And Hong Kong, of course, you went there.
So I went to the early one in Israel. I also went to the one in Tacoma, Prague, Geneva, Vancouver, and Hong Kong. And of course, I was hoping to go to Cardiff this year, but well, hopefully next year.
Absolutely. We will all meet there. I'm very sure that it will be already everything in a piece, and that we will have a chance to see there. And because you were really now all the time involved in the big companies for the harp, you certainly met many people who came to buy the harp in Lyon & Healy, or who were just interested for the publishing and this. Have you, when you mentioned, for example, Vera Dulova, from those people, Josef Molnar, have you had any closer contact with those people to say some memories you have with them?
Not Vera. I did not have the opportunity to talk to her much. Joseph Molnar did come to Hong Kong a couple of times to perform, and so charming, and also so supportive of young harpists everywhere. And I remember, you know, having lunch and dinner with him, and he talked a little about his transition, where he left Europe and went to Japan, and of course we all know the amazing harp group and colony that he started there, and the level of the harpists in Japan. He really was the father of the harp in Japan, and really such an interesting person, very humble actually, but very, very keenly aware of what was going on in the harp world and wanting to support everyone. And I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to have the Harp Congress in Vienna, because that was his hometown.
Absolutely.
And he organized that.
Yes, he really did the whole work by him. Not, I mean, he had maybe some of the people, but it was his like baby, this World Harp Congress, because he was really involved very strongly in this preparation. And because you might have been closer to him than anybody else at this moment when I hear your words, maybe you can also share a little bit about his really stories, how he went to Japan, if you know that from him.
I'm not too sure what the original invitation was, but I know he went very early, I think, to join the radio orchestra in Tokyo, and then started the whole colony, building up harpists, introducing harp to little people, young people, all the way up to professional. And now, of course, his students and their students are now the top recognized teachers in the country. Really amazing. I'm not too sure how he got the original invitation or what the catalyst was to actually go to Japan, but he certainly lived two different lives in Japan, building this up and keeping in touch with everything that was going on in Europe and the rest of the harp world throughout the world.
Absolutely.
He's an extraordinary person.
Extraordinary, absolutely. And he was really so much involved also in, as you said, in the Japan as a citizen. He was really like a European person who was so much already based in Japan, like it would be his home as well. And it's really unbelievable that this person was around us still. Moya, tell me what is your life now during this pandemic time? How does it look in Bloomington?
Well, Bloomington closed the university very early. First, we came up to spring break, which was early in March, and they had already announced that they would extend spring break, so it would be 2 weeks. And then, most of the students left. They do at spring break. They go all over the place. And then they announced that they were not to return. All the teaching was going to go online, and it continued online until last week. Bloomington is pretty much closed. There are 42,000 students in Bloomington in the university. That's a lot. And the town itself is about 80,000. So when 42,000 students leave, you have the full-time residents, which is myself and others. So the town immediately became very quiet, very closed down. The university is being very proactive because don't forget, a lot of the students live in close proximity in dormitories. You can't have that now because of possible contagion. Classrooms are usually full, and they are now trying to think how they are going to deal with all of this in the fall. So I think online teaching will still continue. The other thing is that they have a lot of international students here, and a lot of them may not be able to continue because the embassies, the US embassies have been closed. So there's a delay in issuing visas for them to get back here to continue their studies. So for myself, where I work has been deemed an essential facility because research is essential. You can't stop it. I mean, atoms are not going to stop and wait. I, on the other hand, and the admin staff are able to work at home remotely. So we are now working at home remotely. The university has not announced when they are going to allow people back in yet, but it will be, the research groups will be able to start earlier. The teaching departments, no, because they do not want students back in the summer. They've already cancelled all the summer things. They also cancelled our big summer music festival, which is unfortunate, but everybody understands. So my time has been spent at home, keeping my normal work hours. Being an events coordinator, I was actually working on two very big conferences. One was a National Nuclear Physics Summer School, which was going to be in Mexico City. And the other one is Tau Lepton International Workshop, which was going to be here in Bloomington in September. And because of the situation with Corona, we've had to cancel both of those and postpone them for 1 year. So I'm going through, all the cancellation, rebookings, notifying the speakers, putting it online, doing all of that all over again. It's been a difficult transition, being totally isolated trying to do that. But these days we do have the technology, so we can do this. And then to keep my sanity, of course, I have music. And we're allowed out to exercise. So every day I drive to a nearby lake and I walk, in this beautiful lake. And there are Canadian geese migrating there sometimes. I've seen a swan or two, and we have little resident ducks. And now the weather is getting more normal for summer. Of course, a lot of people are escaping out there. We're keeping our distance from each other, but we're enjoying the nature. So that's why I'm keeping busy.
That's beautiful, but certainly it must be very difficult to all this cancellation to go through and to really prepare it for the next year. I know that it's really incredibly work, and also as you as a director of the USA International Harp Competition, it is going on as well. So you must have also some preparation for that event, which is going to be in 2 years from now, right?
Yeah, I'm no longer the director at the moment. I mean, I went full time into the university.
I see.
So not involved in that at the moment. But yes, I mean, the preparations go on for such a long time. And then, with this year, I thought I had everything set, all the contracts signed, and then I've got to start all over again with different dates and different year. But that's part of organizing one's life. You have to adapt, and for conferences and anything else, music performances, you also have to adapt.
Absolutely. So Moya, do you have still contact with Lynn & Healy, or you also stopped to work there, or is it still part of your work?
No, I don't work there anymore. Of course, they are still the major sponsors of the USA International Harp Competition. So, for instance, when they come here, I see everybody that I used to work with. I mean, I'm certainly in touch with them, but I'm not involved in the music publication anymore. So.
Because I feel you like always connected. Always, I feel like as when I bought my first harp in 1995, just 3 years after my winning of the competition, I got the one harp at the competition. But then I wanted to have another one for a gold, like looking gold harp. So that I went to United States, to the Chicago to choose a harp, and you were there, and you were always connected with this company. So I saw that still you have some kind of involvement in this work as well.
Oh, just kind of informal. But yes, I remember your coming, and got a beautiful gold harp. And of course, working in Lynn & Healy was great for keeping up contacts internationally, because many harpists and students and families and from all over the world would come in and buy the harp, and really a day for celebration when they finally owned a beautiful harp. So.
Yeah, and because, of course, the publishing of Lynn & Healy is still working on, right? It's still going on. It's nothing which would stop. It's still in process, right?
I'm sorry, I missed some of that.
The publishing, the Lynn & Healy publisher, it's still in process. It's not something what is past. It still exists, right?
It still exists. Yes, they moved the music department out to Utah. Which is one of the reasons I moved to the International Harp Competition.
Right.
But yes, it's still, they're going on. Of course, now the trend is now from online publishing. So many of the Lynn & Healy and Salvi publications from the past are now online available. And the trend is going more for less actual hard copy printing and more availability to download online. Personally, I still love the feel of the music, the stiff music on the music stand and having to turn the page. And I do see many harpists now on stage they're using iPads to display their music and read their music. I think I would, being a little old-fashioned, I would always be in a panic that I fast forwarded too fast and I had to move back, and but I guess you get used to it. I mean, you can do the same thing with printed music. You can turn 2 pages accidentally instead of 1, so you have to adapt to the times.
Yeah, it's the time of life at this moment, and I know that we have to adapt. But of course, as you said, it's like to have a book or to have a like e-book like from the internet. It's the same difference. So it's always nice to have something in your hands. Absolutely. And Moya, is there any plan, instead of that you have to now do all this preparation of all these events and to postpone them, is there anything what is now coming on and you have not started to work on it yet?
Not yet in my normal job, because I think large conferences are pretty much going to be on hold for quite some time because it's too hard to separate with social distancing. I think smaller conferences will go on. They will have to be in relatively large facilities so that people can sit far enough apart. But I think even right now, there are many travel restrictions, but I think even in the fall, people are going to be a little nervous about traveling distances and being on a plane, never knowing quite when travel restrictions will suddenly hit. Just before this started, we had some faculty and students in Germany. And then the restrictions started. The first one was by the US, where they stopped entrance from anybody coming in from the Schengen countries. And one of the students actually was a non-US citizen. So that would have been even more because restricted, because he would not have been able to get back. So he had a window of 2 days to get back from Germany. So we were, on email and Zoom kind of late at night trying to get him back, and he did get back in time. The faculty did not. He was delayed. He got as far as Paris. Flight after flight was cancelled, and he had to wait there for a week or so before he could get back. And I think in the fall, people they're bearing in mind that there can still be last-minute travel restrictions. I think they're going to be nervous about traveling. So we're not quite sure what next year is going to be, but I mean, I do feel confident that having postponed both the summer school and the Tower Lepton conference for a full year, for a full 12 months, I'm hoping that things will be much more back to normal, but in 12 months.
We hope so too. But just I want to assure everybody, before we started to be online, we were talking about Moya has at home harp, Salvi harp. You are still practicing even these days, right?
A little bit, yes.
So please be aware, Moya is still playing the harp. She's still in our life. She's still in our community. And what do you like to play at home?
Usually it's something I'm going to coach. I go and practice it. I try the different fingerings, make sure I know what I'm trying to tell the students. So it's pretty much, I mean, my love is orchestral playing, and I can spend hours listening to Mahler symphonies and playing the perfect note in a Mahler symphony just on my own.
So you put the recording on and you play it with it, or how do you do it?
Both. Sometimes I'll put a recording on, sometimes I'll just play and listen.
So you can also share with the people what kind of harp you have at home. So which is your favorite instrument?
I had a Salvi Diana, and most of my career, I did not have a harp. I mean, there certainly was not many harps in Africa. We could not afford one. Throughout all my studies, I still did not have a harp. And then my last year, I went up to the Salvi showroom in New York. Catherine Bride was actually running it then. And there were a number of beautiful Salvis on the floor. And there was an ebony Diana. And I kept going back to this one, and I would go back week after week. Is it still there? Is it still there? I think this is, and eventually I was able to buy it. And that is the only harp I've owned. Now, in orchestras, I normally had Lion and Healy's. But I love the particular sound of my harp. It's very deep, very big sound, but I could also get very soft, very pianissimo, beautiful sound. And it has to be also a harp that is comfortable for you. And in the beginning, harps, of course, are very, very strong tension. But even in the beginning, I could tell that this would develop so that it would be very responsive. And it was throughout all the octaves, and it still is.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very happy with that. Of course, I always dreamed of getting a second harp, maybe a gold harp, but I was really happy with the sound of my Salvi Diana.
It was certainly love in first view and in first sight, right? How it says usually. It was certainly the one which fit you really from the very beginning. And tell me, when you do you do also now online lessons during this pandemic?
No, I have not been. As I said, I'm judging a music festival. Actually, it's next week. That has turned into online. So the students have pre-recorded their pieces. What I will be doing live is one of the categories is sight reading. Well, so that we're going to do live on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that's gone online. But I mean, right now I really don't have regular students because I don't have time in my normal schedule. It's a busy job. So
I see.
when I was working at Lion and Healy in Chicago, I did have a number of students at home.
Mm-hmm.
But since I moved to Bloomington, I've just been too busy. So.
And because you were in Vienna when you were performing with your colleague from the Hong Kong Philharmonic, the flutist, the principal flutist. Did you ever see him afterwards, after you moved from Hong Kong? Don't you miss this orchestra afterwards as well?
Yes, we're still, I mean, we're lifelong friends. We're in touch constantly. She now lives in Maine. And after she left the orchestra, she came back. We put out another recording of flute and harp. Everything from Bach to Mozart. And so she came back to Hong Kong and we recorded that there. And yes, we've certainly stayed in touch. And that's the wonderful thing about meeting musicians and performing chamber music. They really do become lifelong friends, whatever continent you're in. So we keep in touch, and she's visited, I visited her. So. And she may be listening actually, and she was thrilled to find out that this was going to be on the Harp Channel.
I hope she can see you later on, or maybe she's now online with us. And also because it's live also streamed at the YouTube, so those who don't have the Facebook can really see it immediately on YouTube as well. And Moya, tell us, because there are many people who came later, certainly, tell us about the piece you performed at the World Harp Congress in Vienna, because it's a new piece. So if it was premiered in Vienna, as it was the first premiered piece there, or if it was already played before, or it was already the piece which was recorded at the CD which you were talking about.
The piece was Dance in the Forest, arranged by Du Mingxing, the eminent Chinese composer. And of course, it's a traditional folk tune. It had already been performed in Hong Kong, so the premiere was there, and we had already produced the CD. And that's why I was thrilled to be able to play it in Vienna. And we did have many requests for the music. Music actually has still not been published. It's still, I have the copies, but it was not published. And a lot of people really enjoyed it. After that, as I said, that was printed on Hong Kong records, and then that became Naxos, and it has been re-released, the whole suite. It's 2 suites, suite 1 and 2, of all Chinese folk tunes. And it was re-released on Naxos, so I'm happy that it still is in existence.
So this people can get, but if they really very much would like to get the music and to play this piece, is it possible that they can ask you and contact you?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, because we will now hear your performance after we finish our interview, so everybody will hear how wonderful piece and how wonderful player Moya is, and that really we are so thankful that you take your time today with us. Is there anything you would like to share with the people?
No, I think just to wish everybody well in this strange time of isolation. And really, if you have music, you're not isolated. You have the whole world with you. And to try and share music online and then eventually back in person, I think is the most valuable thing that we can contribute to society right now.
You are
so
wonderful.
I wish everybody well.
You are a wonderful person, Moya. Really are such an inspiration for all of us. And really, I am so thankful what all you shared with us and all your life, which was not easy, but you are amazing that you went through all of that and that you still are so positive and that you are doing what you are doing for all of us and for everybody. And that you shared all your really positive thoughts and wise information and advices. I thank you so much, Moya. Take care as well. Stay safe. And I'm so much looking forward to see you in Bloomington or in Cardiff next year.
Well, thank you so much, and goodbye to everybody. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Take care and have a wonderful day. And I will invite everybody for tomorrow's interview with Eleanor Bennett from Wales, who will be not speaking only about her, but also about Ossias Ellis. I'm sorry for mistake now in the name, but who is a very famous harpist who inspired Benjamin Britten for writing the famous suite for harp for him. So we will have a really interesting interview tomorrow as well. And today it was amazing to have Moya Wright today with us, and we wish her all our best. Take care and have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.